people know, I'm Diane, and I'm running for Congress because the world and our nation are facing an existential crisis. We have a president who, according to the Israeli press and U.S. military sources, has encouraged Netanyahu to launch a strike on Iran, which could plunge us into thermonuclear war. The entire European banking system is admitted to need at least 4 trillion euros in bailouts, and therefore what urgently needs to be done, number one, in the United States, is we have to reinstate FDR's Glass-Steagall Banking Act. We have to separate the commercial banks from the speculative banks and stop these bailouts. Number two, we have to restore the American system of national banking and credit as understood by Alexander Hamilton. That means no more Federal Reserve, and it means the ability to fund great projects such as the type that FDR built to get us out of the Depression. Specifically, I'm proposing the North American Water and Power Alliance, which was a project from the 60s supported by both Kennedys, launched by Senator Frank Moss of Utah, which would bring water from Alaska, where there is a massive runoff into the Arctic Ocean, down into the Great Lakes region, all the way to Arizona, New Mexico. This project would employ about 4 million people, many of them for 30 years. And had this been built in the 60s when it was proposed, all of the flooding and droughts and devastation of the extreme weather of last year would not have had the impact that it had. So these are the 3 things that I believe urgently must be done: a return to Glass-Steagall banking, a return to the national system of national banking and credit, and the construction of NAWAPA. Thank you.
It was a piece of legislation that was drafted and enacted for the early 20th century. You know, Glass-Steagall brought forth the FDIC. But to say that there should be a definitive separation between commercial banks and investment banks, I'll ask you to look up some of the banks that did actually survive the financial crisis. They were the ones that were diversified. And with Glass-Steagall, that diversification wouldn't have happened.
I don't think it's the case that many of our institutions are actually solvent. This whole thing has been masked by what Neil Barofsky, the former Inspector General of the TARP, said, which is now we've spent $29 trillion on bailouts. So we're experiencing now hyperinflation in the prices of commodities, in the price of fuel, food, etc. If Glass-Steagall were to be reinstated, it would be a bloodbath for Wall Street. It would wipe out massive amounts of speculative money and banks, but that will not kill people. Cutting Social Security, cutting Medicare, cutting $4 trillion out of our budget because Standard & Poor's and Moody's are threatening to downgrade our debt and dictating policy to the United States, that will kill people. So reinstating Glass-Steagall is only the first step, but it's an urgently necessary one. The NDAA was signed by Obama on New Year's Eve. It allows for the military, anyone that they consider to be a so-called terrorist, to be detained indefinitely without trial, and therefore it is strictly unconstitutional and should be repealed.
I don't believe that we should torture individuals. I don't think that we should hold individuals and detain them without charging them. But I can tell you that we have gone so far down this path, down this rabbit hole, that simply repealing that piece of legislation is not going to solve the problem that we're in. It will stop us from making mistakes moving forward, but it's not as simple as that. And I want everyone to understand that the issues that we're talking about aren't going to be surmised in 2 minutes. If they could be, I'm sure that one of the 436 people, either the President, the members of Congress, or the Senate, would have at least gotten somewhere close to the right answer, but they haven't.
This is directed to you, Jason. There are 3 times in the 3 pieces of legislation that you've taken the position that we've gone so far down this path that it's to a single payer, the NDAA and Glass-Steagall, that we've gone so far past that reinstating them or rescinding them won't do any good. Frankly, I find that to be intellectually dishonest and completely confusing. So could you please help me to understand how you have arrived at this? Once we've gone down this path, we can't fix the position.
I think the first time I used down the rabbit hole was just here.
It's the same thing.
No, what I'm, and let me be clear, because
I'd like that. Sorry.
I've tried to be, and if I've been ambiguous, I apologize.
When I win the election, I think what I'm going to do is get a bunch of buses, and everybody here is going to get on them, and we're going to go down to Washington, and we're going to get Glass-Steagall reenacted, and we're going to repeal the NDAA, and we're actually going to put an end to these insane policies of war and overthrowing every dictator on the planet because they offended us or said we should eat our broccoli like Bush Sr. And we're going to have to take emergency measures to save the country. And you can say that one congresswoman out of 435 may not be much, but one who is aggressive and determined to get the job done can recruit other people, because I happen to know there are a lot of people on both sides of the aisle who agree with what we're saying, and they're gutless. And they're under pressure from Wall Street, and they're under pressure from the president, and they won't take a stand. But a few people taking a stand and sticking their neck on the line will inspire other people to take a stand. And it will probably be the case that I will need backup from my base in the 5th District to go down there and get this done, but that would be my intention. And I would ask that people here, whether or not you choose to support my candidacy or my campaign, commit yourselves to fighting on principle for what you know to be right, and to have the courage to stand up against perceived popular opinion. Because only if the American people begin to do that are we going to save our nation.